You speak about the 10 levels of civilizations, and can you speak on that? And also, where are we going as a civilization?
Oh, well, the latter part of the question, we're headed off a cliff if we don't change directions. As the Chinese proverb says, unless we change directions, we're likely to end up where we are going. And so we need a course correction. The civilizations that are interstellar, in order to cross the threshold where we are, we have these fearsome weapon systems that could eliminate all life on Earth.
Yeah.
And not just hydrogen, nuclear bombs, but others that are classified. So we're human civilizations at a level 0. We're basically not yet a real civilization. We're trying to get there. But eventually a civilization has to reach a level 1 or they self-destruct. And that the hallmark of a level 1 civilization is that it's a peaceful global civilization where all their technologies are life-supporting technologies. They're not ones where you're blowing things up, digging things out of the ground, burning coal and oil and chopping down things. You're using these advanced technologies and you develop a world, and this is where we're headed. We should have been there 100 years ago, but we're running out of time. Now we need to pick up the pace and do what I call a time snap, where we regain where we should have been 100 years ago in 20 years, 15, 20 years. So that's a level 1 civilization. And you imagine, at that point, there's no pollution, there's no poverty. The work week probably drops 10 to 15 hours a week.
Yep.
There's abundance. It's a totally different economic system, environmental system, and justice system, social system, where, there's just not the have and have-nots because there's total abundance due to these advanced technologies that create endless abundance. So at that point, there's the possibility of a permanent peace, a level 2. Now, the thing about permanent peace means that you're not just becoming peaceful and slipping back. And a permanent peace requires a certain level of conscious, spiritual, and social integration. And this is where you develop transdimensional technologies. They're only being used for peaceful purposes. But we've talked about before travel, going from point A to B with anti-grav. Here's a beautiful part of that. Once people are freed from the shackles of the macroeconomic system we're in, which actually is sort of like an extension of slavery industrially, you have the ability to have people really pursue higher states of consciousness. Why? Because they're freed up. They're not working. Both parents aren't working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So there's the ability to engage in creative endeavors, pursue higher states of consciousness, and really develop your spirituality. It becomes practical to do. So, and then, that will allow you to evolve and be ready for clearance, for takeoff, to become an interstellar civilization. That's a level 3 civilization. You are a interstellar civilization because you've been stable. You're peaceful. You're not engaging in weapon systems in space. There's widespread establishment of the science of consciousness, and the integration between your world and other worlds begins to happen overtly, openly. And my sense is that probably in the next 1,000 years, Earth will be fully integrated into these other interstellar civilizations that are at that level, a 3 or above. And then a level 4 civilization, this gets into where you're really developing higher states of consciousness, because at a level 4, you have at least 1% of the population in cosmic consciousness, very high enlightened state. Not everybody, but at least 1%. And that creates an effect on the entire population, again, through this 1% effect that is non-local. And these are the senior ambassadors that we've had encounters and meetings with that are in an enlightened state of cosmic consciousness. Like I mentioned, kindness, Bijou, the healer, they're all in those very high states of consciousness. And contact with other advanced civilizations is their primary purpose. They are literally ambassadors to the universe. Is the CE5 project I have called, we're ambassadors to the universe. And they also provide guidance to emerging civilizations and kind of oversee and be sure that they don't go too far in a direction that could harm other planets. And You know, you see some of the civilizations that are here are at that level where they're trying to be sure we don't have too much damage that emerges from Earth to other places. Yes, I think it's really important for people to understand that right now you and I are awake and we're conscious, and everyone listening. That conscious mind whereby you're awake is actually an infinite field of awareness. We're only identifying it with ourselves, but in reality, it's always infinite and unbounded. And the reason we end up not identifying with the infinite, unbounded aspect of it is that we have been trained only to be focused on our own, what's right in front of us. But, you know, the basic ones, everybody's aware of being awake, sleeping, dreaming. And then there's another one, and the basic one is in meditation. Our society ignores this, is being in that transcendent state of samadhi, where you're just aware of awareness. You're not aware of your thoughts, yourself. You're in this very peaceful unboundedness of being awake. So it's the nothingness of being infinitely awake, not the nothingness of being asleep and dark. So that experience is something that you can have spontaneously or through the practice regularly of meditation and understanding that. By the way, all meditation techniques should be designed to get you to that point where the meditation technique stops. The technique is just getting you to a place where you can let go and where the individuality of your individual soul can merge with this unbounded field.
Do you think that all of this mass consciousness and CE5 protocol, being developed around the world and being done all around the world will lead us to a galactic federation acceptance?
I think there's no doubt that where we're going to end up, and I think I mentioned this probably within the next 1,000 years or so, is that human civilization, Earth, will be integrated into all the others, interstellar, and that's a huge number, by the way. And that exists out there already for advanced worlds. The worlds that have hit level 2, 3, 4, they're already doing that. We're coming along, and there are others, by the way, behind us. There are planets that are maybe where we were, 200,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago. So it's a process that never ends.
So are we at a crossroads between a convergent timeline where either we're going to become a warfaring race that's leading to destruction, or hopefully leading to one of these higher levels of civilization you talked about?
Yeah, we're exactly at that inflection point. And we've been there for about 100 years, actually. I remember we could have had world peace in the early 1900s. We could have had free energy and Tesla-type technologies by the 20s. We could have had electrogravitics, levitation, and very advanced transdimensional systems, certainly by the 40s, 50s, 60s. So this is a matter of choice. And this is the interplay between the fact that there is one era closing, the era of rise and fall and division. We have to learn those lessons, nail them, learn them permanently, and go, okay, here, that path we've done as a collective civilization, species. Now we need to learn this new lesson of oneness, of unity, of consciousness. We have to transcend our divisiveness and find where we're really one. And that's a spiritual issue as much as it is a social justice one. But if we just stay divided into warring camps, it's like the eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. At a certain point, I view this really as a spiritual problem at its root, and the solution is spiritual, not necessarily religious, maybe for some people. But I think for the most part, we have to recognize it as a transcendent spiritual crisis, and there is a spiritual solution. And that has to do with understanding the ineffable but very ever-present oneness we all share through this conscious spirit that is the singularity. That, as Erwin Schrödinger said, the father of modern quantum physics, particle wave theory, in 1908, the total number of minds in the universe is one. So we have to be deep enough to see that, like the compassion of the Buddha, where we see that all beings are us, we are they are us. So that is the motto for what I'm doing is one universe, one people. So I view these civilizations out in space as people, They may be very different looking, they may be very different cultures, but they're people. They're intelligent, sentient people. And I think we need to get to that level of understanding and not project the divisiveness and the racism and all the tribal warfare of the last yuga onto the future.
Yes.
See, I think we need to go beyond that. And of course, the wise people of the last 100 years have all called for that, whether it be Gandhi or Martin Luther King or many figures as spiritual leaders. And I think that at this point, the public has to say, we're going to make this happen. And if we do, it's a collective conscious decision. So it's a choice. We're at a fork in the road here and been there for about 100 years looking at a big perspective, and we need to make the right choice. We need to turn away from disunity and warfare and violence and make a really clear decision that we're going to live peacefully on Earth and in space. So there are people who want to unite the world against something out there.
Right.
That is not going forward, my friends. That's taken a big leap backward and leads to extinction. So we have to make this decision, and we really don't have a lot of time to do it, frankly.
Right.
This has come out in science in the last few years. When people are in a meditative state and they begin to actually increase their IQ, they increase their body-mind complex becomes much more refined, that state gets passed on in the next generation, your children immediately. And then as they evolve, it gets passed to there. So instead of us keep going forward and falling back and forward, it becomes this ascendant arc that is not only is conscious bioevolution, where we're going to become an extraordinary civilization.
Dr. Greer, this has been an amazing interview. Is there one last thing you want to leave our viewers with before we end the series?
Yes, I love the experience that Colonel Corso had in 1956. I was 1 year old. And he had this meeting with an ET out in the desert that had landed daytime. And interestingly, the craft was solid, and then it would dematerialize and look like a heat wave in the desert. And it went back and forth. And eventually, the ET communicated with him. And of course, the colonel was a brash Air Force colonel, he said, and the ET was really wanting them to shut down some of the radar systems that were not just radar, but were directional energy weapons. And the colonel said, "What's in it for me?" And the ET said, "A new world, if you can take it."
Wow.
So what I tell people is that, okay, that's 65 years ago now. I think we need to take it. I think it's time for us to say, okay, this has been possible for decades. Now we need to collectively choose it. And I think of enough people, and I think it only takes about 1%, like I said, that whole consciousness effect, that if 1% of the population understands the power of consciousness, move together as one, become CE5 contact ambassadors to the universe, work in their communities to educate folks, this can happen very quickly now. And since the subject is now being talked about quite openly, we need to say, okay, here's what the actual truth is, but more importantly, here's what everyone can do about it.
Yeah.
So it's really a call to action. It's not just to have the intellectual knowledge, it's actually to move and walk that walk. And I think I would ask that everyone consider what they can do to walk that walk and create this beautiful world of our dreams, in which this ET intimated it's a new world, if you can take it. I think we should make the decision, not only can we take it, we want it, and we're going to make it happen.